leading me, leading you to new beginnings.
To ask who I am and why I came here is a real complex set of circumstances that led me to this here. But it really began on Earth time in 1972 when the experiment that the Syrians set up, which we can't talk about too much at this stage here, began to move out of control. And it was the Dark Brotherhood who first realized the importance of the situation. And they brought forth 4 more members of the Dark Brotherhood all at once to balance, or to throw the balance of power completely off. There was one of each here. It was my great-great-great-grandfather, who was Melchizedek. He's been here since the beginning. He's been here for 207 years. And there was one other person who I don't know that name, had balanced against him. And then they threw 4 more. And when they did, of course, the Light Brotherhood threw 4 more into here to throw the balance. Now, we knew, because time was spherical, we knew this was going to happen in the future, you might say, from a long time ago. And so I was preparing to come here for this time a long time ago, thinking in terms of spherical time, I mean of linear time. And so I was chosen to come here because of the particular qualities that I had. Each one of the 4 were chosen for different reasons. Now, Melchizedek, he's a pro. He's been here for a long time. He knows the human soul inside and out. He knows all the good sides, the bad sides. He knows all about them. But I was chosen because I didn't know anything. I hadn't been in polarity or duality consciousness for a very, very long time. The length of time was in the billions of years. And so I had an absolute innocent aspect to this. I had to be retrained on even how to come into this level. They chose me for this reason. Well, let's put it another way. I had 3 primary what do you call it, missions or whatever to do when I was here. And the first one was simply to witness what was taking place and what happened here. And because I was innocent, I was like a baby to this place, that's what they wanted. The consciousness of Melchizedek wanted me to see it from a point of view without having that sophistication involved in it. The other purpose was to remind the Earth of the Merkaba, and so that part is just about completed. And the final one was to understand the relationships between male and female during this time, because the parameters on a solar system level are very unusual, extremely unusual, and they wanted to understand that. So that was my 3 primary reasons for coming here. And and so I think what I'm going to do is go all the way back to the very beginning of my memories. Now, at one point, I veiled my memories. My memories are veiled with like a white light, like a white fog that I can't see into, from about maybe 30 seconds to a minute before leaving the Melchizedek consciousness. I have a little piece of it to hold on to. I get a little bit of a memory, not much, just a little tiny bit. And it's a consciousness that has no boundaries. It is everywhere, it's omnipresent. It has no form, and yet form is constantly coming in and out of it all the time. And it's a place of incredible beauty and love and power, yet these are just words. Words don't really bring the experience, the scope of what I'm really trying to say. The last thing I remember was these swirling fields of light, kind of swirling patterns of light that were all around me and extended in all directions. There was no like planetary floor or anything else like that. It was just a point in, I had localized myself down to a point in consciousness. I was communicating with myself, but the feeling would be more as though I was speaking with God. And my father aspect of me was saying that he wanted me to come to Earth. And what I was to do was what I just explained, these things. And I was given very detailed instructions on how to get here. And it had to do with movement and how spirit moves through the great void. And so I was told to move in a particular way, which was kind of a motion like this, a backwards and forward motion, swimming type motion. But there was more to it than that. And so after I knew that that was what I was to do, I set into motion a particular pattern that was on a waveform into this dimensional level that would produce very specific experiences from the time that I left Melchizedek until the time I returned that were on a harmonic pattern. In other words, if you had like a sine wave running here, and say this was time, though time is not based on a sine wave. And every so often, at very specific points, I produced an experience that would occur. It would not last very long. It would maybe be only 7 or 8 seconds long in our terms. But that would keep the experience that I would have as I came down here in, it would guarantee that I would have a specific kind of experience, and the end point would be back to where I started. So I couldn't get lost, you might say. At the same time, it gave me almost total freedom, because nothing was programmed in the middle. So I had anything could happen, absolutely anything, in the middle. And those little dots are long periods of time between. That was just sort of a way that it was my way. There's probably other ways, I'm sure. And so I began to make this motion. And almost immediately upon making this motion, all field of light disappeared, and I found myself in absolute blackness. There was nothing. I was in the great void, from which all the most of the universes are created through. And I found myself just making this motion, and I was going what appeared to be, I felt like I was going somewhere, but I wasn't actually, whether or not I was moving, I can't really tell you. I mean, but it felt like I was moving. And I remember doing this for a while. I don't know how long, it's hard to say. There's no time there, there's nothing of this kind of nature. I just started making this, and at one point I realized that I wanted to see where I had been from. And I was actually, there was a motion, there was a direction. So my spirit had made direction, had created the directions by the motion of the intent. Prior to this time, my field of view was 360 degrees, was spherical. But upon taking this motion, it was no longer, I was limited, very much like I am now, in a specific direction. And so I remember rotating around, looking back to where I thought I came, and feeling this incredible awe, because I was looking into space in this the blackest of black space you can imagine, and here was this field of light that spiraled around like a huge nautilus shell. Only this thing was immense. It was like universes across. It was so huge. And it was all these different colors of light and spectrums that were moving in, going in and in and in and in and in and in and in. And I got really excited. I knew it was my home. I knew it was the particular place where I'd come from. And I felt really happy. I didn't feel sad at leaving. I felt happy because I knew that I was doing what I was supposed to do. And so I kept doing this. And I don't know how long I could do it. There's no way to tell. It could have been, but I suspect in Earth time it was probably thousands and thousands of years. Maybe tens of thousands or more, that I continued to make this motion. And then I was told by my father that, and that's like a polarity thing, saying son to father, but it was, I have to use words here. I was told that when I reached my destination, that the light would return. And so I was just doing my thing, waiting for the light to return. And then one day, night, who knows what it was, at one point in my journey, the light appeared, and it appeared just like that. It just, wham. And I was completely surrounded by a light that was real similar to the light that I had left. It was these swirling fields of these pastel colors of blue and pink and gold and white and all these different colors that were all sort of swirled around. And standing in front of me, maybe 10, 12, 13 feet away, was a human form, which was Melchizedek. I had no connection with that human form that in my memory. I didn't recognize him as a form, but what I did recognize was the love that was coming off of him. I felt that, and I connected to it immediately. I was like a little baby, a little tiny baby, and I just went right for the love, and I felt it, and immediately connected to him, and we had a little bit of a conversation that I don't remember exactly what it was. I was very excited about the beauty. The beauty was overpowering. And then Melchizedek said to me, he wanted me to turn to my right, and he turned to his left. And all of a sudden, we took off like a streak, moving to my right, really fast. Him facing me, but everything was just like moving past me to the left very quickly. And all of a sudden, bingo, I was in blackness again. And that color of that light began to recede away very fast. And as I moved out into space, we had no ship. He was in his a living Merkaba field. It was clear. There was no walls. There was no nothing. And I had no body. I was just a formless spirit. He had a form. And he said, well, actually, he didn't say anything. The next thing I had was my eyes, if I had eyes, my field of vision adjusted to deep space, and I could see the stars. And I felt awe for that, because I hadn't seen that level of creation in a very, very, very long time. And and we continued moving at just this very rapid, extremely rapid speed through space. Now, he didn't have to do that. He could have just taken me instantaneously to where I needed to go, but he was giving me a ride. He was letting me see things and see what it was. It's like putting your kid in a car and driving around and letting them see the trees and things. And we eventually, after not too very long, we approached a particular system of stars that here we call the Pleiades. And Pleiades is a very big place. You know, we look out there and we see 6 little stars, and there's really, it's enormous, it's huge. And we went to a very specific planet, and we began to orbit around this planet, moving around it very fast. It was a planet that had a green atmosphere, and it had water, lots and lots of water, and buildings that were all white and kind of molded into the sides of cliffs. And it's all like arch structures moving along the sides. And there were people there that looked very, very, very human, extremely human, except they were all young and beautiful. There was no old people, no deformed people, no sickness, no illness, nothing of that kind of stuff going on at all. And there was total harmony, absolute, complete harmony. I didn't see what I just told you then. I was more involved in just moving around the planet. And Melchizedek told me that I was going to go there for a while. There were no words spoken like we're speaking words now. It's really holographic images would be a better way of saying telepathic holographic images being projected, feelings, everything else being projected to me. And that he would come and get me later. And he began to sing a song. It was like a lullaby. And the song, I became entranced with the melody of the song and the sounds. And the next thing I know, the song began to take shape, and I found myself floating in this room, this stone room that appeared to have these golden mean proportions. It was stones that looked like it could have come from England or Ireland or somewhere like this. But it wasn't dark and wet. It was warm and light. There was a soft glow that appeared to be coming from the air itself that was in there. There was no source of light. And in the middle of this room was a slab that I believe was granite that was about maybe 4 or 5 inches thick and about maybe this wide and about maybe 4 feet long, that was simply floating 3 or 4 feet off the ground. Nothing supporting it, nothing holding it up. And on the slab was a little baby boy. And I remember looking at this little baby, and the baby looked like he was sleeping, and I knew that that was my body that I was going to use, and I got excited again. And I remember going down to it, and it was facing up, and I faced my head down, and I rolled into it, just like I rolled into it. And I started crying. But it wasn't because I was sad or hurt, it was because I was so happy, because I knew I was doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing. I knew I was following the will of my Father, so I knew I was really, I was ecstatic. But I was crying. I don't know why I was crying. I was just crying. And there was a rare blank in my memory at this point. The next thing in my life, it just started. And though I was the same age, I just remember sitting in this room, this very, very big room, and I was playing with blocks. Only most kids play with little tiny blocks. These were blocks of stone that were about that big, each one of them, which had these symbols on them. And there was a big pile of them. I mean, and each block probably weighed, I don't know, 500 pounds or something like that. And as a little baby, my body was maybe 2 years old or something like that. I wasn't very old. As a little baby, what I would do would lift these blocks up into space with my thoughts and feelings, and then arrange them in space in these patterns, which would mean things to me. Everything that they do in the Pleiades, they do, everything is games. It's all games. So the Pleiades is a university. It functions as the solar plexus of the galaxy. And so the lines of energy that come out of the Pleiades stretch throughout the galaxy. So if someone wants to go from one point in the galaxy to another point in the galaxy, they're probably going to go through one way or another through the Pleiades. And because it is this meeting place of so many different cultures, it has become like a school, a place of teaching and learning. And so what I was really doing going there was, my ultimate destination was Earth, but I wasn't prepared to come to Earth. I couldn't just go there. I didn't have in me the understanding of what that was. So they were going to take me down in levels. Very much like going deep into the ocean. You can't just go straight down. You go down, you wait a while till you adjust, and you go down a little lower and you wait a while and adjust. And that's really what I was doing. So they were teaching me about fourth dimensional, these particular Pleiadians were fourth dimensional beings, and they were teaching me their level of understanding of the one reality. And I stayed there for, experientially, though time's not the same as it is here as there, experientially what would feel the same here on Earth, about 15 years. And learned all kinds of things about what's possible in terms of the mind and the heart. And I've seen a lot, and I know what you can do when you're functioning on those levels of understanding. I remember one time sitting in one of the university parts, which were for the adults. And in this room that was probably a half a mile long, on this wide circular platform that had a drop-off of about maybe 40 feet, and it was probably several hundred feet wide, stretching down for half a mile, and about a quarter mile down there was a 90-degree turn with another hallway going down that went down several hundred feet, but you couldn't see where it was. And these adults, these tall, beautiful people that were also learning, and they were learning how to move things through space, much like I did, but without being able to see. And so they would throw these flat, very heavy, what we would call heavy, but they're not, golden discs. They're kind of like Frisbees, only they were absolutely flat. They were like these discs, and they were about that thick. And they would take them and throw them, and then guide them with their mind, and then guide them around the corner down to where they couldn't see to hit a target. And they thought that was so fun. I remember they used to sit there and they would do it for hours, and I'd sit there and watch them, you know. And things like this. Now, it's a game, but on the other hand, it teaches you that it's always learning. It's always learning on how to expand and to work deeper into the fourth dimensional levels. Anyway, one day, I guess my Melchizedek aspect of me that was guiding my descent decided that I had gone far enough with this level, and Machivinda appeared again. At this time, he actually moved right into a room where I was, connected onto me, and we went right out the other side of the room. And I laid this body back down in this place so it could be used again. And went on as a spirit again. We went back out into space and began to move very, very fast. Only now I was more attuned and more grounded, you might say, connected to this understanding. No, I was still a million miles away from being able to sit in this room right now. And we then finally approached a star system called Sirius. And we went into what is called Sirius A. And, no, excuse me, we actually first went by Sirius A and went on, continued past it to Sirius B. And from Sirius B, we went to the, if you were counting from the surface out, to the third planet out, and which is a near total water planet. And it happens to be a planet that the dolphins and the whales of this planet are intimately connected with. They move back and forth on a daily basis to that planet. Lots of them. About 100,000 dolphins a day move back and forth between this planet and that one. And that may sound like a large number, but you may not realize how many dolphins there are in the world. There's, what, 5 billion people in the world? Most people might think that there's, you know, what, a few million dolphins. There's a lot of dolphins on the planet. It's estimated to be a minimum, very conservative estimate of 35 billion dolphins. That there are 7 dolphins for every single person on the world. So as you can see, we're a minority here. And that planet was intimately connected with them, and I can't get into why that planet and that place is so important to the Earth, but it is. And it's extremely important to us. And because of its connection and its gravitational connection on a lot of things, that's why I was taken there. And I then went into further training. The Syrians are not on a high level of fourth dimensional understanding as the Pleiadians. They are good friends with each other, but they're kind of like someone who would be say 8 years old and playing with someone who's 5 years old. The Syrians are like a 5-year-old, and they are much younger and understanding the whole reality. And so I went down into that level. I knew exactly what I had to do, and he just left me in the atmosphere and went on. I haven't seen him since. And when the time's right, I'm sure I'll see him again, and when I do, I'm probably going to leave here. And what I did is I went into the oceans of this planet, and I began to move through the oceans until I moved up to where I knew I was supposed to be, and there was a very large person there, which we would call an orca whale. And I moved right up to the orca whale and felt this same intense love that I felt for Melchizedek. It was the same kind of love, this vast field of love. And I remember moving right up to her eye. It was a mommy orca whale, and I remember moving right up to her eye, and she said to stay, to connect to her. So I sort of like connected to her right beside her eye. It was her left eye, actually. And I swam with her. I stayed with her for, in Earth terms, about a year. And all she did was she told me stories about the Earth. She went back into the history, telling me what it was like to be on Earth and all the things that they had done, all the human things, all the things that had gone on in the human reality, you know, just starting from way, 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 way back and going through and telling me all these kinds of things. And I just listened to her, and I fell in love with her, and I began to feel like I was orca, and I still feel extremely connected to the orca whales, and I feel like she was my mom. I really feel like she's my mom, because I made such a deep connection with her. At one point, I knew that my time with her was over, and one day these 3 Syrian people came to me in like astral bodies under the water, and I knew I was to follow them, and I left her, said goodbye, and we went up into the air, and I remember streaking with those 3 in front. I was directly behind them, going really fast over the surface, approaching this very super modernistic city. And there's very, very little landmass on this planet. There's a piece about the size of Australia, and there's a little piece about the size of California. I was on the piece that was about the size of California. That's all the land there was on the entire planet. And it's a planet bigger than this one. Not much bigger, but bigger. And I remember being taken into this super modernistic room. From our ways of thinking of it, it would fall more into the lines of Star Trek kind of things. And we were, I was taken to this like a crystal bubble. It had a round, like a shell, and then a crystal top on top. It was halfway around it. And inside of that was a very tall male form that was almost 16 feet tall, with this very large head, and dressed in this particular uniform, and laying there like he was asleep. There was no spirit in that person. The body was just waiting for someone to use it. The body, though, in its cellular memory and everything, had everything that I needed to know. So I rolled into that body and became a Syrian male adult. And as soon as I stood up, very, very quickly, I adjusted to the reality. And I didn't have to even say anything. I knew everything I needed to know. I remember we were taken from there over to this wide platform that was outside, huge. It was enormous. It was raised way up high in the city, but it was very, very big. And on top of that was a circular ship, a space-time vehicle. It was extremely limited by what I know now. Its capabilities were only between the third and the fourth dimension. That's it. But it could do either one. Now, I'm in the fourth dimension while I'm there. If you were to see me, if I were to walk in this room right now in that body, you couldn't see me. I would be, though I could see you. I would be on another. I could lower my frequency down to where I was just one overtone higher than what you were sitting on. I could be standing in this room monitoring this, but you wouldn't be able to pick me up more than likely, unless you were very, very, very sensitive. And I then was taken to this big, huge, circular ship. I knew exactly what the ship was. I knew how to run it. I knew exactly how it all functioned and everything else, because that's the body they gave me. They gave me the body of this captain of one of these ships. And I then, the ship took about 350 people to run it, and I was given a second in command and a third in command. The second in command, really we were kind of it was kind of flipping a coin which one was to be the primary person to run it. It didn't really matter, but as it turned out, they wanted me to. But he was also coming to Earth, and he's here now. His name was Balthazar, and I have met and talked with him, though he is now, we've left each other for a long time right now. And then there was this third person who in command who was really there to take the ship back, etc., after we were all done. And it was totally prepared and everything. I didn't have to wait around or anything. I just moved into the ship, sat down, and we took off. And I remember curving out into space, making this wide sweep and going at speeds that we can hardly imagine right now, moving directly toward Sirius A, the sun. I zeroed in on its absolute center and went right into the middle of the sun. The suns are mirror images. What's outside is also inside. And if you know how the mapping of the universe is, you can move into certain suns and come out in certain places. You can't come out anywhere, but there are certain places you can come out. And Sirius A is connected directly to our sun. Science knows this. The gravitational field of Sirius A and our sun are interconnected. They move together through time and space. And so this took about 90 seconds experientially. I broke the surface of the sun. We tuned to the temperature, which is something our science does not understand about tuning. And we tune to the temperature, which makes it just feel normal. And it just basically becomes light. And moved right through into the center and came out the other side. And when we came out the other side, we didn't come out Sirius A. We came out our sun here. And I remember the feeling of being shot out like a slingshot, going really fast out through the sun, floating out into the solar system here. It was great. It was fun. It was really fun. And then making this huge arc, my instructions were to not go to Earth. You can't do that. It's illegal. The headquarters of this solar system are on Venus. And they lie on the 4th and possibly a little bit on the 5th dimensions of Venus. The most intelligent parts of this solar system lie on Venus. And they lie within a race of beings called the Hathors. And they are also 14 to 16 foot tall beings with very big heads, who are beings of just pure, intense balls of light. That's the only way to describe them. They're just pure love. They're like gigantic puppy dogs. I mean, they wouldn't do anything they wouldn't even dream of doing anything to harm anybody, anywhere, ever, under any conditions. Because it's not in them anywhere. There's just nothing. But they're extremely intelligent. They balance this amazing love with this amazing intelligence. And so, for that reason, they have taken on the responsibility of life energy that comes in and out of this solar system. The hierarchy is developed not to develop a hierarchy, but hierarchies are developed because of abilities and what one can accomplish. It wouldn't do much good for me in the situation I'm right now to take control of the galaxy. You know, I would probably crash it in 5 seconds. You'd have to know, you'd have to be in certain places. So anyway, we made this wide streaking arc around, which were moving very fast and actually had to slow down. Approaching Venus, came up onto the surface of Venus and approached it on a 4th dimensional level, not on a 3rd dimensional level. I would not be visible from anything on Earth right now, from this level of Earth. They wouldn't know I was there. And came up to Venus and began to orbit around it from a pretty good distance out, waiting for, my instructions were just to orbit Venus and wait. I had to then, that's all I did, was wait. I didn't know, I didn't know what was to come next. They didn't tell me that. The next thing that happened was the Hathors took control of my ship. And nothing functioned, nothing worked, and they just took control. So I finally just sat back, and I remember it was kind of a funny feeling, having absolutely no control. It'd be like if you sat back and just let go of the steering wheel, and all of a sudden the gas pedal goes down, and the car starts turning, and you can't do a thing. And we got very low into an orbit, and started going really fast. I remember skimming over these mountaintops. It felt like inches, going really, really fast. And we orbited around, I don't know how many times, and then slowed down very fast and went down into what appeared to be a body of water below us. And went right into the water and then went down and settled on the bottom approximately 100 feet below the surface. This ship is big. It's not a little ship. This was a very big ship. I don't know, it's probably, if I had to guess, at least probably a half a mile across this ship. And it had these huge hallways that ran through it that were maybe, I can feel them, but it's always hard for me to pick out the exact size, but maybe 40 feet wide and 40 feet high, kind of like that. And they ran for maybe a quarter mile through the ship, probably to the center. I don't remember right now. And I remember standing in one of these hallways right after we were in the bottom. We'd only been down there maybe 15, 20, 30 minutes, and experientially. I'm always talking experiential time when I'm talking here. And the third in command, he was sort of this little guy. He's probably only 10 feet tall. came running up and said, "We got a problem," and brought me down into one of these hallways. And high up on the ceiling of this hallway, it was beginning to dissolve away, and there was this stuff dripping through that kind of looked like water, so when it hit the floor it would kind of smoke. And he said that we had landed in a body of hydrochloric acid, and that we had a little problem because it was dissolving the ship away very quick. So I said, okay, and got us, we had a smaller vehicle on there, like an escape vehicle that everyone could get into. It was tight, but we could all get into it. I told everybody to get on the ship and we would leave here immediately. And I had no idea why this was happening. This is what I mean about not judging situations, just moving with the situations as they come, whatever the images are, just moving with them and doing the best you can. That's all you can really do. And so everybody began to get on here, and it probably didn't take more than 2 minutes for everybody to, I mean, they were fast. They knew exactly what to do, and they were getting on here. In the meantime, while that was taking place, Balthasar came from out behind another hallway and walked up toward me, and he was sitting there with this big grin on his face, and he was totally naked. And he was going, he says, "I just remembered something. I just learned something." I can't remember, how do you say it? I remember something, learned something. And he says, "Come here, I got to show you something." And he took me down into the hallway down there, and the third in command, which I can't remember his name right now, was came with us. And he said, and by now the stuff was like really coming off the ceiling, and he says, "Watch this." And he walks right into it and stands there. And he says, "Do you get it?" And I did. I got exactly, I had forgotten. In the time that I'd taken his body, I had forgotten that it's all light, that the whole reality is light and is controlled by your thoughts and your feelings and everything else. I mean, I got so involved in the Syrian way of thinking that I'd completely forgotten my training. And I said, "Oh yeah, of course." And so I sent the little guy over to the ship and said, "You go up into orbit and wait for us, and we'll call you later. You'll pick us up later." And they did that, and they were gone in a flash. And I walked into there, and I remember sitting there, just walked right into this hydrochloric acid, and it just ate up my clothes. Just ate them all up, like that. But it didn't affect me at all. I remember we were jumping up and down. "Yeah, I remember, me too, I remember, great." And that's what the Hathors were doing, was setting up a situation, because I'm actually believing this is what they thought. They knew that I had forgotten, and so they set up a situation that I would remember. And so I remember going down to this place, and it was like an escape hatch, which was this round tube that was probably no more than 6, 7, 8 feet around. It was sort of an emergency escape hatch, and it had sort of a curved door on it. And Balthasar went in there, and I started to go in there, and I remember opening the door. I heard this noise, and I looked down the hallway, and here was this floor-to-ceiling, wall-to-wall wall of hydrochloric acid going down this hallway, heading at us. And I remember going, closing the door, jumping inside this thing, and getting out of there as fast as I possibly could. And I remember swimming through this stuff up to the surface, and it felt just like warm water. You know, I could do it. And I remember swimming over to the surface and crawling up onto this kind of a reddish orange dirt bank, and both of us laying down on this like we're on a beach somewhere, and thinking in my mind, well, I know that it's probably 800 or 900 degrees here, but that doesn't matter, because we were just tuned to the whole thing. We now had this aspect of us going that didn't make any difference. What was going on, we could cope with anything at that point. And minutes later, the ship came and got us, the little one, and we went off and we left Venus. I never saw a Hathor once, not even one. And though I did later when I was on Earth, but not during that time. And we then headed for Earth in this very small vehicle. And the entire time of going through all of this in Earth terms, if you were to leave Earth and go all the way to and land on Sirius, that entire time is probably no more than a 3-day period of time for everything. It's very quick, so they were a little cramped in that ship, but it wasn't terrible. I mean, they could get back. And I remember going into this little room where there were several, though I can only remember 2, of these same kind of pod-like things with these crystal tops. And us, Balthazar and I, laying down these big, tall male bodies in these things, and this top going over us and sealing. And then I remember just rolling out and moving right through the walls of the crystal tube, and I was pure spirit again. And I remember saying goodbye to everyone in my heart, and moving right through the walls with Balthazar of the ship and being in free space. We were now around the Earth. We were in the atmosphere of the Earth, and we were in the 4th dimensional aspect of the Earth. This would be totally invisible on all levels from our level of consciousness here. And together we began to look for conscious life, and found that there was very little conscious life around the planet. It was almost like there was nobody there, there was nobody home. And we started going up through the overtones. Hey, you guys, where is everybody? You know, where are you guys? Where is everyone? There's nobody around. You know, there's people around, but it was very unconscious life. And finally found this place, which was on the 9th, 10th, the 10th, 11th, and 12th overtone of the 6th dimension of the Earth. We found an enormous level of very conscious life there, which happens to be where all the ascended masters are now residing, most of them, except for a few that, you know, like Saint Germain and people like this who function on Earth levels a lot. But the vast majority of them, of which there's a little less than 8,000 of them, are sitting there in this very specific overtone, most of them sitting on the 12th overtone. And I found myself now in a situation that I really had no or very, very little ability to cope with. I entered the time period that this was, in terms of Earth time, was the year 1819. That's when that physically took place. That's a very exact time. And I ended up staying there for about 31 years on the 6th dimension level of the Earth, studying from the Ascended Masters, so that I could understand how it was to be human. You know, how could a human be in a body and not feel connected to the rest of reality? That was just as you're trying to figure out how to get the other way around, it's just as hard to go the other way, maybe even harder. After studying for 31 years with the Ascended Masters, I felt the time to actually do it and take a human body was ready. I felt like I was ready to do it. But it's a very difficult thing to make that step. To go from unity consciousness into polarity consciousness is really hard. It's equally as hard, if not harder, than going from duality consciousness, is what we're doing now, and going up into unity consciousness. It's almost easier to go up than it is to go down. And I really didn't know what polarity consciousness was. It was like outside of my understanding. I didn't know exactly how to do it. But you know, but I felt like, okay, now's the time here, jump in the cold water and do this. And so in order to, when you're in unity and you're going to go into polarity, in order to do that, you have to split yourself into 2 or more. And so I divided myself into 2 parts. And now this is what was happening on Earth. To a tribe of Indians in In New Mexico, high up in the Taos Desert, there's a little tribe called the Taos Indians. They're Pueblo Indians. And we're now in the year 1850. And the chief of that tribe, actually the chief's wife, had a dream that she was going to give birth to a male baby who was a kachina. A kachina is an interdimensional being. And from American Indian terminology, that's what I was, because I was coming from another world, another level of existence. And the chief himself didn't know if it was really true until he also had the same dream. And then when he had the same dream that it was really true, they were very excited that this baby that they were going to have was going to be this male kachina. The medicine woman, who was also the midwife of the tribe, she knew, she was told about the dreams of what was to happen, and this was and to prepare for this birth. However, she had a dream that the baby would be a girl, and she didn't know what it meant, and she was afraid to say anything, and she said nothing. When the birth took place, it was in a teepee, and they had set this teepee up with all these Indian skins and everything all inside there, and it was very beautiful the way it was set up. And the only people in the teepee was, well, in the beginning there was the woman who was having the baby and the medicine woman. There was a younger woman there for a while, but not toward the end. And when the baby came, it was a little boy. The medicine woman in her mind is going, what's going on here? You know, still never said a word. And the daddy was called in, the chief was called in. He saw his son. He was very excited and happy. And the mother saw it. And then the daddy was told to leave, and he left. And the mother was given the baby, and they were waiting for the afterbirth. And when the afterbirth came, which is what the woman thought was happening, it was another baby, and it was a little girl. And I was both of those babies, both of them at once. The only thing is that in the American Indians, well, I don't know about all American Indians, but in the Taos American Indians, if twins are born, they have superstitions against that. They got a lot of superstitions that really aren't founded in a lot of ways, but they do. And they would have killed one of them. And it would have almost surely been the little girl, which would have been me on this level that you're now talking to. And, but the medicine woman felt, just in a moment, made a decision. And the decision is that she wasn't going to tell them, and she wrapped up this little baby and hid it. And then very soon after that, turned it over to someone else or something else like that and left. And the mommy and daddy never knew that there were twins involved in this situation. She took me a long ways away, and at some point a little later, I don't remember because I was so little exactly how it took place, but she went out in the woods, and then a week later, 10 days later or something like that, came back into the tribe saying that she had been given this baby. Now that's not unusual in the American Indians. Things like that happen, and there's no adoption things, there's no records. I mean, someone dies, there's nobody records anything, there's nothing. There's just life goes on, and no one even thought anything of it. Didn't think anything of it. She just said she was given this baby from this other tribe, and she was going to take care of it. And there was nobody suspected a thing. She was the only one that knew. And so now I was living on Earth out of two different bodies, one male and one female. But my connection to the male aspect was severed. In other words, me, as I'm talking to you now, was the little girl. And I don't have a conscious connection to the male part, though there is very deep connections on other levels that are there. And so I was raised as a, she knew that I was a Kachina also, and I was told, I was raised to become a medicine woman. And I learned all the crafts of herbs and crystals and how to control weather and how to and do all kinds of things that we think are myth, which was common day to us. I could make rain. I can make rain right now. It's really easy. I still know how to do all these things. It's very, very simple. And so I studied with her. But the thing was is that she told me that I had come from another world and that I belonged to the tribe and that I was to never marry and was to never have children. That I belonged to the tribe, and all that I was to do my whole life was to be given to the tribe. I was to remain a virgin for the rest of my life. And which didn't mean a thing to me. Didn't mean anything. I mean, because I was told that from the time I was really, really little, all the way up. And I became very good friends. My name then was Chione, and the name of the male counterpart in terms of American Indian levels he was called Two Feathers, though he had an actual sound in Tewa. In the Tewa is the language of the Taos tribe, and Two Feathers and I became really, really good friends. Neither one of us knew we were brother and sisters. We just liked each other a whole lot. And he was being groomed to take over the tribe. He was an extremely popular person. They gave him the nickname of Geronimo, and Geronimo was the sacred saint, you might say, of the Taos tribe, and was considered one of the greatest people that ever lived. And so he was nicknamed Geronimo. And he was a really good person. We had a friend, the two of us, in the beginning, ever since we were very little, this boy. His name was Nura. And he became real good friends with all the three of us, actually, were very good friends. Only the two of them were actually closer than I was, probably because I was female and they were male, but they became very, very close all the time, and that's just the way life was. I kept studying all the various things that I was being taught, and everything went just fine and great and dandy and no problems at all until I was in I'm not exactly sure of the date. I'd have to really think about it, but I believe I was in my very early 30s, possibly late 20s, but I think I was in my early 30s, somewhere around in there. One day I went out to pick some herbs out into the forest near this particular river, which this river flows out of Blue Lake, which is the sacred lake of the Taos Indians. And I went near there to pick some herbs, and I met Nura there out in the middle of the forest. And I remember we sat down on this green, kind of grassy hillside that was sort of sloped, and we just started talking about things and stuff, and very innocently. But one thing led to another, and we ended up doing something that neither he nor I was supposed to do. We made love with each other, and we weren't supposed to do this. This was beyond felony. This was on a level much greater than murder in the eyes of the tribe, because I was jeopardizing the entire tribe by breaking my thing. But I did it, and I don't know why I did it, but I did it. And And of course, naturally, I got pregnant on the very first time. And when I realized the situation, I didn't know what to do. I was completely freaked out. And I didn't want to tell my mom, who was really the medicine woman. It's a very complex situation here. I didn't want to tell anyone. I talked to Nora, and what we decided to do was this. I had a lot of freedom in this tribe. I could do pretty much anything or go anywhere. And so when I was 3 or 4 months along, somewhere around in there, I told the tribe, well, I'm going to go on this long trip. I got to go pick these herbs a long ways away. And I'll be back in a few months. And nobody thought anything of it. And actually what I did is I went about 10 miles away where Nora had set up a teepee and it provided me with everything that I would need. And I had this little baby. Little baby girl. And what Nora then did was take the baby and went way out around and circled way back around and came in from the other direction and said that it was his baby from another woman, that he actually had 2 wives already. And he was saying that he told them, the tribe didn't care what happened. He just had to tell us what he said, that he had this baby with another one and he wanted them to take care of it. Nobody thought anything of it. They don't have the kind of moral patterns and things that we have just simply don't exist. They don't have that kind of stuff going on at all. And they just said, okay, sure, if it's yours, it's ours. And they took care of the baby. And I came back in, a little bit later from maybe a week or so later from the other direction, and no one ever knew. And time went on, and I figured, well, okay, I got out of this one, and many years went by. Now there's probably, and now I can get it closer in time. I would have been, let's see, about 36 years old, and one day, Nora and Two Feathers were sitting around hanging out somewhere, and Nora, figuring that enough time had gone by and everything like this, confided in Two Feathers about the birth of this baby, told him the truth. Now, if it had been anyone else, he might have got away with it, but he was the one who was to become the chief, and he had a deep sense of responsibility for the tribe. And when he found out what Nora told him, he was furious. He was so angry that he really wanted to kill me. But what he decided to do was something else. He decided that he was going to make me pay for what I had originally done. And so he went out into the forest and found me, tied me up, beat me up, and raped me for the intention of making me pregnant so that I would have to go back and relive this whole thing all over again. He figured it didn't make any difference because I'd already broken the sacred act anyway. He wasn't thinking this all the way through. He was acting on pure emotion, not thinking the whole situation. And he did this to me 2 or 3 times, and then after that, he continued to do it to me maybe 20 times or more. But each time he got softer and softer and softer, and something was beginning to happen in him. He had never been with a woman ever before. And what happened is he slowly became in love with me. And we finally did. I finally did conceive, have this baby, only he now really loved me and the baby and everything else that was happening. And he changed his whole viewpoint and said to me, well, don't worry, I will talk them out of it and everything will be fine and we'll just be together. This was his thing like this. He said, we'll change it. He was going to go talk to his father and all this stuff like that. I didn't see how, but that's what he was convinced he was going to be able to do this. And so he went to his father and told him the truth, the whole thing, what happened. And his father said nothing, absolutely nothing. Just said, interesting, and wouldn't say a word. And much time went by. In fact, nobody, none of the elders, nothing, said anything to us at all, or tried to stop us, or anything, nothing. And so we were beginning to think, well, maybe they've decided just to let us alone. And the baby came and was born. And I kept the baby with me in the tribe. It seemed like this impossible thing that I was doing, but no one said anything. And the baby was about 4 months old to maybe at the very oldest 6 months old when we were called before the council. And the council, and this was deep in December of the year 1888. And the council came before us and said that they had decided what they were going to do, and that as of that night, Two Feathers was to take the baby and ride away from the tribe and never come back. Never come back. And he was never to incarnate. They understood reincarnation. He was never to come back into Indian form either. He was to leave. I was told that I had to stay with the tribe because I had certain functions within the tribe that no one else could do, and I had to complete them. And one of them was one of the most important functions. If I did not complete this function, we wouldn't be alive right now on the whole planet. We were creating another third and fourth dimensional pyramid, which became the largest pyramid ever created in the world. Each side was 2.5 miles on each side, and it sits in the Taos Mesa right now. It's still there as of this minute. It was created by 5 different people from 4 different tribes, and I was one of those. And that pyramid had to be completed. It was completed by these very large crystals that were placed in the ground at an angle, and the beams would come up and cross and form this pyramid, which was holding the grid together, the grid that we're of this consciousness that we're now in, holding it together as all the grids, the temples around the world were dismantled and put into the Christ grid. And so this monstrous, huge pyramid kept that alive while everything else was being dismantled, and so that's what its function was. And we and just an interesting little side note, when we finished that pyramid, the tribes made a little clay pyramid about so big, an exact replica of the one in the sky, and we put a turquoise round stone on the eastern face of it and embedded it in there, and in the turquoise stone we programmed the events that would happen in the future around this particular thing, and this was to become a sign that would happen in the future. And that was buried in the ground near one of the legs, near the Rio Grande Gorge, and at this very specific place. And what was programmed is that this certain woman who used to be an American Indian but would then come into a white body long in the future would find this little pyramid. Well, recently I witnessed it take place. And this woman, who's this beautiful soul that owns the Taos Gem and Minerals store in Taos, was walking along there and saw a little tiny piece of this pyramid sticking out. It had worn down to this place, and she saw it. And she opened it up and pulled it out and had these little handles underneath it and lifted it out into the air and looked at it and brought it back to her place, and she'd never seen anything like this before. The very next morning, a member of the Taos tribe came and asked for the pyramid. They knew the moment it was removed from the ground. And that was the sign that the final times of the day of purification. It was not the final sign, but it was one of the major signs that had been programmed into the realities, just like I said, these little sine wave points, these little points that would absolutely happen though they don't program the rest of the stuff. And so that's now back at the tribe and in the kiva. So the tribe told me that I could not leave because I had to finish some very specific work for them. And I knew that work would take about 2 more years before it would be finished. I got to speak with and say goodbye to Two Feathers, and what he wanted me to do was, he told me very quickly for me to run away and to meet him down at this very specific spot down by the Rio Grande Gorge. I knew exactly where he was talking about. I knew I couldn't do that because I had to finish this. It was more important than my life. But he didn't care. He said, "You do this, I want you there," and this kind of stuff. And I didn't know what I was going to do. Well, the universe made certain. I can remember clearly him having the baby wrapped up, and he had this blanket wrapped around himself, and it was at nighttime when he left, when they made him leave, and it was in the middle of a storm in December, and it was snowing. And I remember him walking, riding his horse, this white spotted paint horse, over this hill and disappearing, and I never saw him again. And they immediately, he went out of sight, and they immediately arrested me and took me into one of the rooms in the Pueblo where there were no way in or out, and kept me there for 30 days to make certain that I wouldn't ever do exactly what they thought, what he was wanting me to do. In the meantime, he went down to the spot and waited with this little baby. And he waited, and I didn't show up. I was supposed to show up the next night, I think it was, and I didn't show up. And I didn't show up the next day, and he waited for 9 days. And on the 9th day, and I don't really know if it was an accident or if it was on purpose, I, to this day, have not asked him. But the baby froze to death. And exactly 24 hours, and he timed it to the minute, he committed suicide. And he laid down in the snow. He took his clothes off, laid down in the snow, and froze to death with great remorse and in tremendous sadness. And I didn't know this had happened. I didn't know what had happened. I just knew that I had to continue, and I continued making the what I had to do with this pyramid. 2 years later, in the year 1990, when I was finished with this, they again arrested me, took me down into one of the kivas, and said, okay, it was now time for me to leave the tribe. They said that when I left, I had to go into a white body, specifically, not any other kind anywhere else. I was not to come back into an American Indian body. And that I had a whole list of things that I had to do for them from this body. And then I had to meet back with them at a certain time later on in the future. And which I did. I did all of that. I did everything they wanted me to do on every level later on. They then told me that, except for one thing, there's one last little event that I have to do, one last responsibility. But other than that, I've completed everything. But I went down into the kiva, and they said, okay, now you have to die. It's your choice. You can either kill yourself or we will kill you, whichever one you want. I said, I'll do it myself, thank you. And all I did was lay down and just stop breathing. It was easy. All you got to do is just get over that one little place, and then your spirit's free. But I did it in a particular way that is actually talked about in the Emerald Tablets, where you don't lose your memory. So I died. I held my breath, and I died in the kiva, and that was in the year 1890. And I immediately went up into the higher dimensional levels. I had all my memories back at that point. I remembered who I was, where I was from, everything else, and the entire, not only my life on Earth, but everything else. And I went back up before the Ascended Masters, and and sat with them for 82 years studying on how to live on this earth and how to get those memories. 82 years. And then on April 10th of 1972, I walked into this body. I wasn't born like I was the first time. I just walked in. It saves time. And I actually started communicating with the person that had this body before me for 7, 8, 9 years prior to walking in. And then when the time was right and everything else like that, he breathed out and I breathed in. And it was totally legal. And I took over this body and began this life here.
I believe in true love. It's opened up my heart, leading me